Hello and welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Israeli Defense Forces have begun bombarding parts of Gaza City in preparation for plans to occupy the enclave. As of Sunday, the Hamas-run health ministry said 64 people had been killed and nearly 300 injured in Israeli attacks. But the overall number of those killed since Israel launched the campaign to defeat Hamas has risen to nearly 70,000. Of course, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says plans are ongoing to rescue the remaining hostages in Hamas captivity. He says he still intends to defeat Hamas and that the occupation of Gaza will help make that happen. Mediators in the war, such as Jordan, say Israel's occupation plan is killing the prospects of peace in the Middle East, while others, such as Qatar and Egypt, want Israel to accept proposals to agree to a ceasefire as Hamas has. Mr. Netanyahu says he's going forward with his plans. We'll have more coming up in a bit, as well as my conversation with former Nigerian Consul General to the United States, Ambassador Keshi, on Mr. Netanyahu's new plans. We'll delve into these in a moment after a quick check and other discussions in diplomatic circles.
Wanneer is het genoeg? Wanneer is het genoeg voor dit kabinet?
The Netherlands Defense Minister and Acting Foreign Minister, Ruben Brekelmand, says the Dutch cabinet is still willing to increase pressure on Israel despite parliament voting not to pass a series of measures against Tel Aviv during a session in The Hague on Saturday.
Dat laat zien dat wij dat als kabinet heel duidelijk afkeuren.
Brekelmand opposed unilateral sanctions on Israel over its settlement expansion, arguing that existing diplomatic efforts and condemnations have failed to deter Israel from changing its policy. Instead, he advocated for escalating pressure through coordinated European action or with like-minded nations. On Thursday, the Netherlands joined 20 other nations, including the foreign ministers of UK, France and Italy, in condemning Israel's plans to expand its settlement in the West Bank. The move followed the Dutch government's decision in July to ban Israeli ministers and Bezalel Smotrich from entering the country for their active support of illegal settlement expansion.
Proberen om via die landen die contact hebben met Hamas de druk op Hamas op te voeren, uiteraard.
Шановні пані та панове.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has vowed that Ukraine would continue to fight for its freedom while its calls for peace are not heard.
Заява президента України.
He was making a statement in an address to the nation on its Independence Day in Kyiv, marking Ukraine's declaration of independence from the Soviet Union in 1991.
В такий важливий день для України, українців, День Незалежності.
He told the nation, "We need peace, a peace where our future will be decided only by us," adding that Ukraine is not a victim, it's a fighter.
Нашу суверенну державу. Саме в Канаді одна з найбільших, найсильніших українських близькими.
Taking part in this year's celebrations is Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who stood beside President Zelensky at St. Sophia's Cathedral as he addressed the crowd. Carney later told the crowd gathered that Canada will always stand with them, shoulder to shoulder. Finally, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Western countries are seeking opportunities to undermine a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Ukraine.
Welcome back. This weekend, protests held in certain cities around the world condemning the war in Gaza and condemning the Israeli Prime Minister's expansionist plans in the enclave. Let's begin from the one that held in Tel Aviv.
Hundreds of people joined the protests which took place over the weekend in Tel Aviv, denouncing Israeli military plans to occupy Gaza and urging the government to pursue a diplomatic resolution to release hostages. The protesters chanted and held signs with various inscriptions. Some believe that the Israeli Prime Minister is going to continue the war despite growing public outrage and alleged violation of international laws. Protests also held in the city of Tangier in Morocco. One demonstrator said he joined the march to express his solidarity with the people of Gaza, adding that the Palestinian cause dwells in their hearts and minds. Another demonstrator says her heart aches, not knowing what else to do. Over in Sydney, Australia, hundreds of people demanded an end to the war in Gaza. The protest took place at Hyde Park, and many were seen waving flags.
I came here because I'm morally disgusted by what the Israelis are doing to innocent civilians. The premeditated bombing, starvation, shooting, it's indefensible. The world needs to stand up against this sort of barbarism and brutality.
But in Gaza, children are the hardest hit from the war. Not only are they being killed by military fire from forces, they're also dying of hunger and malnutrition. This disturbing footage shows two sisters in a hospital looking emaciated due to the lack of food and medicine. They're still under the age of 10. One therapeutic nutrition specialist says every patient in her ward of the hospital has lost more than half of their body weight. The girl's mother says this is a clear evidence of famine in Gaza. A UN-backed report recently classified the food crisis as a Phase 5, the highest level on the food insecurity scale, warning that 500,000 people are at immediate risk of starvation, destitution, and death. The World Food Programme states that over 300,000 children are at serious risk. Food supply remains a challenge for the people of Gaza, and there are not enough food trucks coming in. Countries such as the UAE have been carrying out airdrops in the enclave. On Friday, they carried out the 78th Birds of Goodness Humanitarian Aid airdrop, part of Operation Chivalrous Night 3, into the Gaza Strip. The operation was conducted in cooperation with Jordan and in partnership with Germany, the Netherlands, and France. It follows a supply of tents, food, and medical supplies that came in through the Rafah border crossing from Egypt on Tuesday last week. The delivery was part of a broader humanitarian effort by Arab and international partners via land and air to provide food to the people of Gaza. All this is taking place as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced midweek he will finalize the approval on the Defense Ministry's plan to take over Gaza City, while also kicking off negotiations to release all hostages and end the conflict under terms acceptable to Israel. On Wednesday, the Israeli army announced it issued approximately 60,000 reserve orders as part of preparations for the next phase of Operation Gideon. In the meantime, people in Gaza continue to live each day in uncertainty of their continued existence in the Strip.
Joining us now is former Nigerian Consul General to the United States, Ambassador Joe Keshi. He joins us from Abuja. Ambassador Keshi, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Do you think that occupation of Gaza has always been Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan?
Absolutely. Some of the plans that you are hearing today were not drawn up yesterday. They've been in the works. They've been in the cupboards because these are not new plans. They've thought about it many years ago. They've done the design, of it all. It's all part of the long-term Israeli strategy to take over most of the land belonging to the Palestinians as part of the effort to destroy the two-state solution. I think what has happened in the last couple of years or decades was the fact that they have no strong international support, even from the United States. Successive governments in the United States have always cautioned them against doing things like that and have told them privately they probably will not enjoy United States support. But the presence of the coming of President Trump apparently seems to have emboldened the Israelis and, as to what they are doing today. So, yes, the plan has been on. It's not a new plan. It's just that all this you are hearing that has been approved. No, the approval has been there for a long time. They just reiterated the approval to be able to execute their long thought out plan about taking over Palestinian lands.
But how would this fit into Netanyahu's plans to defeat Hamas, to also release all of Israeli hostages who are being held by the militant group?
Amarachi, you know what's so interesting? I think this is the second, almost the third year. Netanyahu started from day one by insisting that the goal was to defeat Hamas and really get the hostages released. But look, I also think that over the years, we have overrated the Israeli security agency. The whole world believed that Mossad was the most efficient, most dangerous, you just name it. Possibly number one, anytime you drop a list of intelligence agencies between the CIA and Mossad, they probably come between number one and number two. But what has happened over the last couple of months since this crisis started is, in my view, is the fact that we have overrated for so many years Mossad's ability and capability, ability to resolve problems. So when you now see what is going on, you begin to wonder exactly how, despite the fact that they are classified as number one and efficient, that they cannot, for more than almost 30 or 40 months, they cannot find the hostages, in Gaza that they are occupying. And they think that they have destroyed half of the Palestinian land. Yes, in some areas, there are no buildings standing. The only time they were able to get out any sort of hostages, apart from the dead ones and the ones they found in some, were the ones released by Hamas. So how you keep saying that you want to defeat Hamas, but you have not succeeded in defeating Hamas that do not have the same military strength. So all this question of defeating Hamas, again, is part of Netanyahu's plans to do what they had always wanted to do. This is not a new thing, as we said, when we started. It's all part of executing what they have wanted to do, particularly since Netanyahu also saw an opportunity and went to bed with the far right, and they have been emboldening and threatening Netanyahu that if he makes any peace, they withdraw from the cabinet, and Netanyahu idea of perpetuating himself as a prime minister will just collapse.
There have been protests, lots of them, I'm sure. And I've seen, in international media calling on governments to pull their support for Israel. How difficult is this, and why is it such a difficult position to even take for many of these governments?
It's going to be difficult, again, because of the guilt we all feel. The British, for example, cannot exonerate themselves. They created part of this problem when they took away the Palestinians from that land in order to bring back the Jews. The Americans, look, Amarachi, if you go to the United States, I think well over 80-something% of the media is controlled by the Jewish. Half of the people in parliament, are loyalists of the Jewish lobby. So it becomes so difficult because everybody, as I keep saying, has a sense of guilt at what has happened to the Israelis in the last during the Holocaust and, centuries ago. And so everybody is being careful and tactical the way they are, If not, the international community can actually come. Look, nobody is saying that, look, the best way out is let's send peacekeeping forces to that United Nations peacekeeping forces to that place and try and rescue the hostages. Why is nobody making such a suggestion? If it's happening in Africa, where they think that we are barbarians and we are very brutal in sense of the way we do our things, everybody in the world would have been talking of sending United Nations peacekeepers to Africa, to whatever country is concerned. But here, nobody's even talking of raising a peacekeeping structure to go into that place, take over the place, which in my view is probably the only thing that could, but because the Israelis will resist that, nobody wants to put that on the table. Look, I know in September, a number of countries says that they are going to recognize Israel. We wait, the Palestinians, we wait, yes, we wait and see. But the truth of the matter is that it's a hollow recognition if they cannot even get the land to live in.
It is sad, really, because I've been wondering exactly what benefit it will be to the Palestinians who live in Gaza, what this recognition will bring to them. And honestly, I really can't see it unless you do have a structure on the ground to ensure that, the fighting stops. I mean, we're seeing pictures of people dying. We're seeing them starving. People running after aid trucks, and then there are reports of Israeli forces killing people whom they claim are militants as well. About the starvation and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we know that there have also been conflicting reports of, pictures that have not really reflected what is on the ground. Reporters or some journalists trying to manipulate the pictures to make them seem like there's more suffering than there is. How do you think that we should balance this when we look at pictures coming out of Gaza? Should we take that with a pinch of salt,
No.
or how do we go ahead verifying those pictures?
No. Amarachi, from day one, because the Israelis had in mind, let me use the word deliberately, to be wicked and outrageous in dealing with the Palestinians. It's like that popular saying, you want to kill a fly, you go ahead and use a big hammer just to kill exactly. Again, I go back to what I said earlier on. If the Israelis were serious in the first instance, if the Israelis had no hand in creating this crisis, if Mossad was as good as we were made to believe, the Israelis could have gone in there to look for their hostages, just like they did in Entebbe a couple of years ago. And they've carried out this kind of operation, after the Munich Olympic, the Munich Olympics some years ago. Everybody that took part in that operation that killed, Israelis in Germany in that Olympic, the Israelis took everybody out. If we're talking of the same Mossad and Israelis had no plan to do what they are doing now, there was an alternative for the Israelis to use. Use the Mossad, find the people, kill whoever, the Hamas or whatever, bring out your hostages. But no, they had a plan to take over the place, and this is what they are, strategically, cleverly deceiving the world and implementing. So that would be my response to your question, because as it is today, the world seems completely helpless in trying to help the Palestinians. I know that the Arabs are trying their best, but in my view, they need to do more beyond negotiating for peace. I think they also need to very strategically confront Israel. Israel wants relationship with the Arab world. And the Arabs need to come together and place on table their terms. The United Nations need to put together or suggest. I know that the Israelis do not want to hear anything about the United Nations. They call the United Nations all sorts of names. But the truth of the matter is that the United States the UN is trying to carry out its responsibilities of peace and security in the world and taking care of the humanitarian crisis, which again, they've taken them out. They've killed journalists so that journalists do not report the actual facts of what's going on the ground. Well, they allowed Palestinians and Palestinian journalists. But you saw what they did about a week or two ago. Yeah. The journalists that were reporting and feeding the world as to what was happening on the ground, and is still happening today, they were deliberately executed. They were deliberately executed. Look, I think more than just holding Prime Minister Netanyahu responsible. I think the world should actually hold all the leaders of Israel responsible for mass killing and accuse them also. Look, if some people were taken to be tried for what happened to the Jews, I think that a number of Israeli leaders today we should set up a court to try them again. Because look, history has a way of repeating itself.
Yeah.
And we all need, if we are human beings, if we are human and we have a heart of human beings, we should all be sympathetic to the pains and the sufferings of the Palestinians.
How much of an impact do you think that, this war could have on the existence of the United Nations? It was set up to stop wars like this from ever happening. UN has not been able to quell this war, as well as so many others going on around the world. I mean, there's a crisis in Sudan that is yet to be resolved. There are wars going on in the other parts of Africa, the DRC and the M23 rebels, and there are activities also on the continent. There's also the Russia-Ukraine war that is yet to be resolved, although you have the U.S. trying to mediate in that. I mean, the U.S. has now stepped aside and left the Ukrainians and the Russians to go ahead and seek peace. How much longer do you think the UN can exist with all of these wars popping up in places around the world and they're not being able to resolve any one of them?
On a private level, I actually fear for the future of the United Nations, particularly in the era of Trump. In his first time around, Trump, just saw the United Nations. He has no interest in multilateral diplomacy to start with. And if I were in his shoes, I think if he had tried to ensure that he brings in the United Nations to back up some of his plans, it would probably be better for the rest of the world. But look, quite a number of American politicians hate the United Nations, obviously because they've not been able to use the United Nations as much as they would have liked to carry out their own objectives. And the same thing you can see Israel, doing. But look, because we need the rest of us, the rest of the world need the United Nations to be there, because as of today, there's no other organization that can really support for a number of activities. We have an obligation, the world has an obligation to keep the United Nations, growing. But I think that our own role from this part of the world is to aggressively find a way of reforming the United Nations. The veto system has to go. But in doing that, we must also step up to be able to take up a number of responsibilities. And I think this is where the African nations, the Arab countries, Latin America, we're actually not doing too well. We are consistently, when it comes to anything the United Nations wants to do, we are consistently depending on America. We are consistently depending on the European Union. The European Union and some, generous donors. But we ourselves need to, if we want it to survive, we need to step up our game. I'm talking of African states, Latin America, the Arab world. Look, the Arab states are rich enough to help come to the rescue of the United Nations financially. They are rich enough to be able to support WHO. They are rich enough to support UNDP in the activities around the world. For goodness sake. It's because we have allowed America to bear the burden for so many years. And now this is what is happening, because if they withdraw their funding, a number of the operations of the United Nations suffers. So we need to look at this thing all over again. But we, the rest of the world, we need to step up our game if we want the United Nations to survive. Remember that when the League of Nations collapsed, we experienced the Second World War, and you never can see exactly, given the way Putin himself is behaving today, wanting to seize more territories, that we are not even very close to another Third World War. But I think this time, definitely, it will be a different, world war, and I can almost predict that I do not see Africa, for example, joining in such a senseless, adventure that some characters will create for their own personal ego and lack of understanding of the need for peace, security, and for all human beings to exist as one whole body of the human race.
Ambassador Joe Keshi, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you again for your thoughts and your analysis today.
Thank you very much.
And that's our show for today. Your comments are always welcome. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Bye for now.